Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amirah Zahra, and my student number is 2005086083. And in this occasion, I would like to present to you non-literal language processing. So the first one, we want to talk about the types of non-literal language. So there are indirect requests, like can you open the door? Do you have the time? Would you pass the salt? Which contracts with direct requests or commands, like open the door and tell me the time. So the first one is the indirect request. The second one is idiom, like Dave kicked the bucket and Caddy spilled the beans. So the first one is indirect request, and the second one is idioms, and the third one is different kinds of metaphors, like Susan flew down the street on her bicycle, and that lecture was sleeping pill. And then the fourth one is irony and sarcasm. So like such as when your friend says no that was exciting after the sleeping pill lecture. Okay. So there are five forms. The first is indirect request, the second one is idioms, the third one is metaphors, and the fourth one is irony, and the fifth one is sarcasm. So all of these forms have in common the characteristic that what the speaker said, the literal meaning is different than the interpretation that the speaker wants you to formulate the speaker meaning. The next one, we want to talk about the standard pragmatic view. So the standard pragmatic view assumes that computing literal meaning is the core function in language interpretation. According to the standard pragmatic view, when people hear a metaphoric expression, the first interpretation that the language comprehension systems comes up with will be the one is the most closely connected to tangible objects and the directly perceivable word. So according to the standard pragmatic view, so when a person hear a metaphor, the first thing that will be pop up in their brain is probably the nearest mean of the word. So and then the standard pragmatic view of non-literal language interpretation argues that the literal meaning is computed and at least temporarily considered as the intended meaning of the expression, even though that initial interpretation is later discarded in favor of a more sensible one. Alright, so the next one is according to the standard pragmatic view of non-literal language interpretation, the reanalysis process involving computing an alternative meaning rather than an alternative synthetic structure. Okay, so the next one, according to the standard pragmatic view, solving the recognition problem involves computing the literal meaning and checking whether the literal meaning makes sense in context. So the listener first computes the literal meaning, then attempts to integrate that meaning with the linguistic and social context, and then after that, listener will engage in further pragmatic inferencing and non-literal interpretation only if the literal meaning is deficient in some way. The next one, we want to talk about the metaphor. So metaphor allows us to indicate a relationship between two elements. So the first element is the topic and the second element is the vehicle. So the topic is the focus of the conversation. It is what the discourse is about, and then the vehicle is some concept or exemplar that we are using to comment on the topic in the expression. The A is B form is one kind of metaphor called an attributive metaphor. When you use that kind of expression, you are asserting that some attributes like properties, characteristic or features of the vehicle apply to the topic. People interpret metaphors by mentally converting them to similes. Similes are kind of like metaphors in that they both have a topic and have a vehicle, but similes are unlike metaphors in that they have an extra word, like usually, and that extra word makes it explicit the two things are being compared, like that. To interpret metaphoric expressions, the listener must discover the grounds of comparison that the speaker is using to connect the topic to the vehicle. The property matching hypothesis explains why and how similes and metaphors communicate relationship between topics and vehicles. According to the property matching hypothesis, interpreting similes and metaphors depends on finding properties of the topic that are identical to properties that the vehicle has. The advantage of this approach is that property matching can be used to interpret both literal comparisons and metaphoric ones, so it does away with the need for any special interpretation processes that apply only to metaphors. The salience imbalance hypothesis is a refined version of the property matching hypothesis. This hypothesis attempts to explain why speakers choose the metaphor A is B from sometimes and the simile A is like B from other times when highlighting relationships between topics and vehicles. Alright, so the next one we want to talk about the embodiment and the interpretation of the non-literal language. So Gibbs is a person that embodiment and mental simulation play an important role in metaphor interpretation. This conclusion this conclusion is based on metaphoric expressions that call upon our experience with physical bodies and physical processes that operate on those bodies. For example, the way we talk about emotion frequently evokes the metaphor emotion is liquid in a container. In studies where people are asked to talk about their emotional experiences, they often time use terms that refer literally to liquids and physical processes. Cognitive linguists like Ray Gibbs, or the Gibbs from the first one, refer to the physical process associated with liquids, heat, and containers as the source domain. They suggest that understanding complex domains like emotion involves mappings between the source domain, heated fluids, and the target domain, emotion. If understanding idioms involve only the manipulation of abstract mental symbols, there is no particular reason why engaging in body action should facilitate their interpretation. Alright, so we jump to the next one, the neural basis of non-literal language. So neuropsychological or ERP and neuroimaging fMRI and PET experiments show that different networks of brain areas respond differently to literal and non-literal language. Sorry guys, I have a flu. So these studies supplement data from studies of patients with lesion or or the brain damage who may have selective deficits in understanding or producing either literal or non-literal language. The left hemisphere good at clearly and sharply activating prestored semantic relationships, which is ideal for the processing of conventional familiar, well-worn metaphors, while the right hemisphere is better at activating non-salient meanings. What makes something salient can be a function of frequency, or like more frequent meanings are more salient, conventionality, more conventional meanings are more salient, or literality. More literal meanings, everything else being equal, are more salient. Critically, the non-literal meaning of an expression can be more salient than the literal meaning if the non-literal meaning is more frequent. Okay, baby, that's all for me. Thank you guys for watching and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye bye.